Why is this such an important topic? And I think if you and I can explore that to get started, why do we want men to be part of this conversation? I think that's a real good starting point for this podcast.
I think that makes a ton of sense. And my experience is that we want men to be a part of this because of, I think, how it impacted us. And as we started to learn about menopause, we realized how much we didn't know. We realized how hard it was for our wives to be going through it. We realized that this is something that even women, in some cases, don't know much about because doctors aren't trained to support them, and their moms didn't talk to them about this and prepare them for it. And I think we both just realized this is something that men need to be a part of. As a partnership in a marriage, you don't get to not go through things together, and this is something that our partners are going through.
I cannot agree with you more, Jesse. When my wife came home and told me that she was menopausal, I didn't know what that meant at all. I didn't have the faintest idea.
Right. Right. Well, and my wife hasn't even told me she's menopausal. Like, I'm now recognizing, and I think she's recognizing that she's dealing with perimenopause symptoms in her mid 40s, which statistically basically has to be true, right? Perimenopause can start as early as the age of 35, but by the time you're 46, whether you're feeling something or not, you're in a perimenopausal state statistically. And when I started to understand more and more about this, I started to see things, and quite honestly, my wife started to see things that we both didn't actually attribute to this menopausal journey. And she started to learn more about it, and we started to have open conversations about it. So it's been enlightening. It's been enlightening to say the least.
Oh, and I have to agree. And I mean, your wife will be going through exactly what my wife has gone through and what other people's partners are going through. And for my wife, I mean, my wife's name's Desiree, and she's 55 years of age. And when she started this journey of hers, she didn't have the faintest idea what she was going to go through. I mean, it's still sometimes she wakes up to a new symptom. Um, no one had taught her. Her mom hadn't had this conversation. She was naive towards her own menopause. So therefore, I was even more ignorant to what she was going to go through. So I agree with you fully. It's been a learning curve for both of us. And, I love my wife, you love your wife. And there's a lot of men out there who really, really adore and love their partners. And it's not ignorance. It's just that no one's told them what to expect. No one's told them what the loved one is going to go through.
That's probably one of the biggest eye-opening aspects of this whole journey for me, and understanding and learning about this is how I just expected, out front, that women would know everything about this, right? They'd be experts, and we would be the ones that are just have no idea what's going on, right? And the sort of classic, oh, the men often just don't know what's happening. They don't get women. They don't know what women want. They don't, all that kind of. And I just believe this was going to be another one of those scenarios where it's like my wife was going to say, well, welcome to the club. Glad you've decided to show up. But what I found when I first started posting TikToks about menopause was the majority of women who were coming into the comments actually didn't know some of the things that we were talking about, and they were
Correct.
they were also trying to learn about this. And I started to hear about how they didn't talk about this, their moms didn't prepare them for it, and all the things that we now know to be true. And I think that that's what probably got me, one of the things that got me most interested and passionate about this topic was the pain that I can see women are in and are going through. The thought that my wife is going to experience or is experiencing some of that, and I just don't even know about it. And then there's the future generations. The fact that I have a 14-year-old daughter. She's going to be going through this too. I don't know what her journey is going to be like. It could be terrible. She could be on the real severe side of this, right? I don't know. But what I want is for her to have a different experience than women are having today.
Very, very much so. I mean, I'm a daughter of a, sorry, I'm a daughter. I'm a dad of a daughter as well. And, I look at my son, I look at my daughter, I look at the journey my daughter's going on. And, she's 35 years of age. And whether you like it or not, if you're born female, you are going to have a hormonal storm ahead of you. It starts with periods, it goes into your reproductive years. And whether you like it or not, you're going to go perimenopausal. It just depends what age you're going to go through, and who knows what your journey is going to be like. And then you're going to have your menopause day, and after that you're going to go postmenopause. And we all hope that our daughters don't go through it severely, but there's no guarantees. Yeah,
Absolutely.
we heard a horrendous story. Someone sent me a message on Friday evening, just before the weekend started, saying, "Have you seen this post?" And it was about a woman who has just taken her own life, and that they found the body, and she's committed suicide, and she put it down to the pain she was going through and enduring through menopause, and she didn't feel understood, and she felt invisible and unseen, and no one cared about her. And this isn't a once-off story. We're hearing these stories all the time, and it's sad. It's really sad.
I'm hearing it in the comments, and it's scary. There are comments where women. I haven't heard comments that I would report. I haven't heard comments about somebody saying that they will or going to do harm to themselves. But I have heard comments from women saying that they're not sure, if they can really handle this. This is more than they have ever imagined that they would go through. It's they describe it as the worst pain they've ever felt, or they describe it as hell. They describe it as suffering alone, suffering in silence, not understanding what's going on, not understanding how long it's going to last, not even knowing why it's happening, not knowing what's happening. It's the list goes on, and every single day I get, I think I'm getting about on an average 1,000 comments a day on my
Wow.
TikTok platform, and the majority of those are women in pain. There's some
Well,
gracious comments, there's some thank yous, there's appreciative stuff. There's some women that share some really useful things that I think other women can pick up on, or other husbands can pick up on. But mostly it's women. Almost, you have this sense, or at least I have the sense, where it's women are, they're finding platforms like ours, and they're using it almost as the only way in which they have a voice. And I don't know if that
correct.
sounds too dramatic, but it literally, it seems like sometimes when women are commenting on what they're going through and how painful it is, they're coming across a platform like mine on TikTok, and they are saying it's almost like they're just expressing everything that they're going through and how difficult it is, because they haven't had any other outlet, or anybody else is willing to listen.
Yeah, very true, Jesse, very true. And they want to be heard. They want their story to be heard. And, you've got to feel for them, because let's rewind this to the men for a second, Jesse. And maybe we'll shock the ladies listening to this for a second. But, I'm still very involved in sport, and I've got a lot of male friends, and a lot of male friends whose wives are perimenopause and menopause. And I'll tell you the sort of comments I hear on the field. And I'm sure if you can maybe share a couple of comments you hear, but the brutal truth is that I hear comments like, "She's absolutely crazy. Oh, she's just so argumentative. She wants to fight with everyone." I hear comments about children locking themselves in their bedroom when their mom comes home because they just think crazy mom's back again. I hear comments about even the dog and the cat run for the safety, and the dog doesn't dare get off its dog bed. And I hear stories about sex, and, do you guys still have sex? Because since I've been married, our sex life has gone out the window. And so many of these can be answered by people like you and me, and we can give men real advice around that. So if we can touch on the advice in a little while, but what sort of comments do you hear from other guys?
I wish I could tell you I hear a majority of supportive comments, but the truth is I don't. I Mostly men that come into my TikTok channel at the Parent Express, they will say things like, "Oh, got it. I should trade her in for somebody younger." I hear that. I hear I'm going to trade her in. I hear, I didn't sign up for this. I hear things like, she's not who I married, right? And I think what I struggle with, if I'm going to be honest, as a man passionate about this topic, passionate about educating husbands about it, um, I struggle with sort of like the reality of there's going to be a number of men that you and I don't reach. Like
Correct.
And I absolutely do hear, and it's worth saying that I also hear the positive side. I do hear men saying that talking about this is helping them understand it. I do hear men saying that they're opening up conversations with their wives that they weren't having before, which is something that happened with me. But these comments that I hear from men that are like the comments you just shared and the comments that I hear, um, I don't know. It's terrible. To be honest with you, it just makes me try to. I don't know how they got married. I
Yeah,
mean,
very true.
I
Very
really
true.
don't. You know, like if you hear some of the things men are saying, I'm like, how did you end up in a relationship if this is how you see women, right? Because it's a bit of a testimonial on how they see women in general. It's actually not just about menopause. A guy that would
Correct.
say something like, "Well, I'm just going to trade her in for somebody younger." I, you've got problems far beyond understanding menopause.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And you know, it's very interesting that you say that. And I think the ladies that are listening to this will really appreciate what you're saying, Jesse, and what I'm saying, because to all the guys out there, you know, if you're really, even if you're joking about it, if you've ever considered trading her in because you didn't sign up for this, let me reinforce this by telling you she never signed up for this either.
And the next woman's going to have it too, by the way.
Hell yes. Yeah, just wait a few years and you're back in the same boat. You know,
Yeah.
the grass is always greener on the other side. Hell no, it's not.
Mm-mm.
You know, because if you're going to bail out from your current wife, you're going to bail out from the next wife, and you're going to bail out from the wife after as well. So, guys, and I appeal to you all here. It's time for us to stand up like men. You know, if we big tough guys, let's turn up and be big tough guys for our women because they're going through some hell. You know, maybe this is a good time to say it, Jesse, but what shocked you the most from a symptoms point of view, you know, on your journey of learning, understanding, and knowing more about menopause and what women go through? What shocked you the most?
I it's almost all so bad that I don't even know where to begin. As far as what shocked me the most, I think what I let me answer that in two ways. What shocked me the most that I can relate to is the lack of sleep. Because when I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm a disaster. But that for me is a day, right? I'm going to probably get a good night's sleep the next night. I'm going to be tired. I'm going to sleep well. I'm going to wake up the following day and I'm going to be fine. When I started to understand that not getting sleep was going on for months or years for women, that was pretty eye opening for me because I can't even imagine what that must be like. I can't even imagine how you go through your day, how you continue to, raise children, do hold a job, right? All the things that, that they have to do every single day. How do you do that off of months and years of lack of sleep? Um, and then I think the other one that really stood out for me that I can't relate to is this sense of a loss of identity, like
Yep.
a loss of who I am. Now I don't recognize myself in the mirror anymore. I don't understand what's happening to me. I don't even know who I am anymore. Like those types of comments, um, those are scary to me, right? And I can't relate to what that must be like. I mean, the fact that women say that they're sure that they have dementia, and I've heard experts talk about that as a real thing. They think that they are actually losing their minds. That to me just sounds impossible, impossibly
Yeah,
impossible.
it's frightening, and you know, so much of this stems back to exhaustion and tiredness. And you know, Jesse, you and I have spoken about this previously, but you know, just on camera now for people to hear it, you know, I often say to guys, imagine not getting a good night's sleep for one night. That's
Mm-hmm.
hard enough. You know, don't come near me tomorrow. I'm going to be a bit grumpy.
Right.
So as a man, you get a second night's bad sleep. You're going to be a little bit more grumpy. Try your third night and your fourth night's bad sleep. And this has been proven. The special forces have proven all of this. You know, suddenly you're irritable, you're slightly confused, your performance is not of the same standard it is when you've had a good night's sleep. Your diet goes for a a bad trait because you start introducing sweets and you start introducing crisps. So many of these problems you can trace back to a root cause, which is sleep. Because if you don't get a good night's sleep for 4 nights, 5 nights, or 6 nights, you're a different person.
Yeah.
As you just said, some of these ladies are not getting good night's sleep for 9 months, 10 months, 2 years. So, how can you expect them to concentrate the next day? How can you expect them not to be irritable? How can you expect them not to be angry with the dog or the cat or your son or your daughter or even you as a person? How can you expect them to be tolerant? And you can go to all of these facets around, tolerance, accepting other people, irritability, and you can push it all back to tiredness. But it's a known fact that if you're not getting good night's sleep for days and months and that, you start looking and you start sliding into that dementia space. You start sliding into Alzheimer's, and there's so many negativities around it. And just so the guys who are listening to this understand, this isn't just I can't fall asleep at night. This is not just I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. This is restless leg syndrome. This is tossing and turning all night long. This is your heat regulation, your hot flashes, your anxiety that's playing up. There's so many things that these women are going through. It's actually unbelievable.
It really is. I mean, that. Well, first of all, so much of this is actually explainable, right? If you understand the impact of these hormones that women are losing and what losing those hormones is doing to their bodies and how that's affecting the areas of their brain that regulate temperature, that regulate mood, that regulate sleep, the testosterone, the estrogen, the progesterone that they're losing that impact things like libido. Um, it's interesting that it's explainable, but it obviously doesn't make anything easier for women. But what I'm trying to hold on to for men is exactly what you're saying, right? This is you can either explain this through science, and I'm not a doctor, but I'm just learning about this and trying to understand it. And there is some science that I'm picking up on as far as like the impact of estrogen on serotonin in the brain, things like that. Or you can try to explain it through men or to men through common sense. And I don't really care which one we use, and I try to use both, to be honest. But sometimes I try to say to a man, like in conversations, like you just said, which is, imagine if you didn't sleep for a week, right? Imagine if you were up for 2 hours a night, five nights in a row, a month, 2 months, whatever. Sometimes I try to connect that way with husbands, and then other times I try to connect a little bit more biologically. Let me
Correct.
explain to you why this is happening to her. Um, I think for me, both work. As far as what impacts me, what makes me want to understand this more, what makes me want to show up like a man and support my wife, um, they both make sense. Sometimes it's the common sense. I just had a bad night's sleep, and then I think to myself, "Gosh, this is what she, could be going through for months." Or if I'm not feeling like myself, this is actually a reality for women. For me, it's just a day, right?
Correct.
Um, but also just biologically, and I think for the libido, a lot of men jump ship in their relationships because of a loss of libido, a loss of sex drive, and for me, I think it helps to understand that that's a hormonal change, right? That one's a little bit less common sense and a little bit more of this is a hormonal change she's going through. It's impacting her libido. It's not about you. It's not about your relationship. It's not about whether or not she likes or doesn't like sex anymore. This is a hormonal change that she's going through, and that's something that I think men really need to recognize, especially as it pertains to libido.
Correct. And she hasn't fallen out of love with you. She's changing. She's not the same woman that she was when she married you. And and we're not the same men that we were when she married us either. So there is a hormonal change. But on top of that loss of libido, it's also really hard to want to get down and dirty with someone when it's hurting you. If sex is painful, I'll go to any man, and I always like to try and get down into a man's head and
Mm-hmm.
say, guys, just think of this for a second. If you took your penis out and every time you penetrated your wife, you were in severe pain, you would limit the penetration because you didn't want to go through the pain. Now I'll put the shoe on the other foot.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you do it to her, she is in pain. And that's for a number of reasons. And one of those reasons is dry vagina. We're not trying to go scientific with the guys. We're trying to make them realize in men speak.
Right.
If something's hurting you, you don't keep putting your finger in the fire. Ouch, I burnt myself. You might try it a second time. You don't do it the 10th time, the 12th time, the 15th time. So there's a lot of reasons behind here that, and I think that's what you're doing so well, Jesse, and I think that's what I'm doing, is so often we've got to get down to the same level as the guy and just put it into guys' logic, guys' common sense, bloke talk as if you're having a beer. Like, if this was happening to you, David, if this was happening to you, George, you wouldn't be turning up wanting to have sex.
Yeah, 100%. And you know what? You know what I find actually is a response to that. I don't know if you've heard this, but I'll hear this in comments from a man almost exclusively. But if I do a post that infers everything that you just said and flat out says sex hurts, and that's a reason why you're noticing a lack of intimacy, men will come back and say, "Well, we deal with andropause, so we're going through this too."
That's shocking.
and and I'm like, look, man, you need to just stay out of the comments. But I looked into andropause, by the way, just to go down that road for a second, because menopause was at least something I had heard of. Andropause I had never heard of, and so I looked into andropause a while back. And the one thing that struck me was, as much as men are losing testosterone, and that can impact libido for a man, just to be fair, um, the loss of testosterone is gradual. It's very gradual, and it's over a long period of time. 1 to 2% a year, I think, something like that. Whereas women literally have a testosterone estrogen crash, through in menopause, when they start to get into the menopause years. It's a much more dramatic experience. And when it comes to andropause, from what I've learned, it's like 10% of men might get low enough testosterone and have symptoms accordingly to where they need to see a doctor about it. And the vast majority, of men, 90+% of men, don't actually feel anything at all, right? Whereas
Correct.
in menopause, so it's like andropause might happen to 1 out of 10 men, and menopause happens to 10 out of 10 women. So
Correct.
don't make
If
that.
you're born female, you are going to go through some level of perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause,
Right.
and that's just a fact.
Right. You were talking about, so I just looked at this comment. This comment is from a woman named Jill, and she says, if men had to go through this, we would have standardized care for menopause.
And she's right.
And she's right. And
She's
I
right.
heard this from Dr. Mary Claire Haver on a podcast the other day, and it was basically, she was saying, if men had to go through half of what women go through in menopause, the way she put it, she said it would be a national crisis. If men were going through this, if men were dealing with a lack of sleep,
100%.
it would literally be a global pandemic. Uh,
Correct.
and doctors would be doing tests and studies and scrambling to understand it. But if women are going through this, it's just, it's just something that happens to women.
Correct.
Is essentially the attitude.
And you also mentioned, Jesse, and correctly so, about one of the things that really horrifies you and scares you about this is as a woman, your loss of identity, looking into a mirror and not seeing yourself and not understanding who you're turning into and what you're becoming and what life has got in store for you. Because, so many of our women go to work,
Yeah.
they're misunderstood at work, they don't feel understood at work. And that's not just by men. My wife was working at a private hospital and she eventually resigned, but not because any men didn't understand her, because the girls in her office who were younger than her didn't understand what she was going through. So this is female driven as much as it's male driven. But in the workplace, if a woman is of a certain age, or men as a whole, they just don't seem to understand what a menopausal woman is going through. And I think it's really tough. So imagine going to work for 7 hours, 8 hours a day, where you don't feel like you fit in anymore. You have self-doubt, your self-esteem's gone rock bottom. You then get back into your car and you drive home, and you could be going through driving anxiety. Your head's rushing around with all sorts of thoughts. So you haven't got away from it. You've
Mhm.
gone from the deep end to the deep end, and then you walk into the house where the dog and the cat have run away scared, the kids have locked themselves in the bedroom, husband's trying to ignore you because he doesn't want any fallout in his world, and suddenly you feel like a stranger in your own house. I mean, how terrible is that?
I just read some comments this morning that are exactly what you're saying, which actually struck me in a bit of a new way than some of the comments had in the past. Which was women were talking in this conversation in the comments about how overwhelming or how overwhelmed they are, how everything is overwhelming, how they're at a heightened state of stress and overwhelm all the time. And it's exactly like you're saying. It's at work, it's after work on the way home, it's when you get home, it's what home is like, it's sleep, it's waking up the next day, and it's doing it again. And no point in any of that is there relief. It because it's internal, right? It's not something that's happening to you from the outside. So you can't run away from it, you can't go somewhere else, you can't, you know, ignore it or avoid it. It's with you everywhere. The mental and the physical impacts of menopause are with women wherever they go, and the lack of understanding of it seems to be rampant from everybody around them. So you're trapped. I mean, they're essentially trapped. There's nowhere to run to get away, right? And that's what's I think most disgusting about what some men say about a menopausal wife, right? Well, I'll turn her in for somebody new, and it's like, well, you get to leave,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I mean, if you're an asshole, you can leave, but she doesn't get to leave. She doesn't get to escape, right? She has this whether you're there or not. Um, it's eye opening to me the constant state of overwhelming stress that women are in.
Correct. And the anxiety that they go through. So I read a post, and I think it was on Dr. Louise Newson's Balance app. I think it was on the Balance app that I read it this week, and she's just done a poll and a study of her members, or a group of her members, and don't hold me to the numbers, where she asked what the number one most severe symptom was for ladies currently, and she was expecting hot flashes to come up as the go-to, but it wasn't. It was anxiety, it was stress, and it was everything to do with the brain more than what she was expecting it to be, which was really, really interesting.
It makes sense. I mean, I've dealt with anxiety, plenty of times throughout my life, and I've seen a therapist for it, and I've gotten to a better place. But I know what it's like to have a panic attack. I know what it's like to feel anxious and to feel stress. I can relate to that feeling. I don't think the feeling of anxiety is unique to a man or a woman. Anxiety is a human feeling, and stress and overwhelm is a human feeling. The difference is I was able to see a therapist, work it out, and move on. But a woman who is dealing with anxiety because she's having massive cortisol spikes due to estrogen drops, a woman who's dealing with anxiety based upon losing herself, losing her identity, dealing with anxiety because of lack of sleep. Just a lack of sleep can cause anxiety. She's dealing with that. And
And
then,
imagine the feeling of grief.
yeah,
Imagine the feeling of loss. I mean, you could have been just this amazing person who was enjoying success in everything you do, from your family through to your work, through to even sport as a woman that you might have been playing, but you could have been coming along at 33, 34 years of age, really on a high. Everything in life's going well for you. And then suddenly, literally 12 months later, bang, it's all changed.
Hmm.
Uh, that you've got to think that you would be looking back, you'd be looking at yourself in the mirror and go, what the
I want my life.
where have I gone to? Like, what's happening to me? Why am I going through this? Why do I feel so anxious? Why is there so much despair? Why do I just not feel the same? Why am I not sleeping well at night? Why am I always hot? You know, surely, and I'm sure it happens. There's going to be this sense of grief that you've actually lost yourself.
Yeah, I think that's right. And that's something that I just can't imagine. And this goes back to talking about educating husbands on menopause, and they're the common sense route or the science route. And I don't know how how a husband can listen to what you just said and not want to do something about it, not want
Yeah, there's
not want to educate himself about it. And it's not like you don't, you and I uh, try very hard to educate ourselves about this topic because we're passionate about this, right? We read books, we talk to experts, we learn about this. But an average husband doesn't have to do that. They
correct.
literally just need to. The average husband, I would like to think, could listen to the first half of this podcast and think to themselves, "Whoa, wait, what? This is something that I need to understand." Um, the fact that so many just don't do that, it's really hard. It's almost sad as a man, right?
It is sad.
It's sad to be a part of the population that seems to lack so much empathy, so much compassion, so much grace, especially towards women. I just
And Jesse, and we're not asking any men to go and become a medical expert. We're not asking any guys to go and become a medic in any shape or form. And their women wouldn't want them to. All we're asking them is to maybe even utter three words to their wife, to their partner, of I believe you.
Mhm.
Like, I want to understand what you're going through. Let's sit down. Tell me how you're feeling. Explain to me what you're going through. Not so that I can repair you, not so that I can tell you how to rectify yourself, so that I can understand you. And I think if we could start helping more men to realize that they don't have to fix their partner or their wife. What they need to do is try and understand what she's going through, to be there, to have a shoulder for her to cry on. Because I tell you what, and Jesse, I know this is true for you as well. Our wives have picked us up on our darkest days, and they've been cheering us on our biggest successes.
Mhm.
And over the years, we've never had to ask for that. They've just been showing up for us, but they've been showing up for our children. They've been supporting us. They've been picking us up when we felt down. And now it's our turn to do the same.
100%. I just sitting here listening to you talk. It makes me really reflect on that being true for me and my relationship and in my marriage. But also, to what you were saying earlier, it's my wife doesn't actually want me to be an expert in menopause. That's not actually going to do me a lot of good. The last thing she wants is for me to try to educate her, right? What 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 she, and I believe you said it perfectly. What women would want more than anything else is for a husband to believe them, for a husband to think
Correct.
that they don't. The husband doesn't need to understand HRT. They don't need to understand estrogen and progesterone and testosterone and serotonin and all of these other things. They just need to have enough compassion and grace to believe their wife when she says that she's hurting, whether it's physically
Correct.
or mentally, and and advocate for her to get the help that she does need from experts, from medical experts that actually can do the job. Um, and I hear that so much from women in comments, and they'll say that their husbands feel like menopause is an excuse. It's an excuse to be mean, or it's an excuse to not have to do things, or whatever. I'm reaching here because I can't really put myself in the headspace of a man that would think that, but I'm trying. I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand. Like, what is this? What does the man actually think is going on? And from what I'm hearing, men actually think almost in a way, Lawrence, where like they some of these men must believe that women got around one day and decided to invent something called menopause to you know so that they could have like this fallback excuse for whatever. It's all ridiculous. I can't really wrap my head around it, but I go back to I literally will read these comments and just go, how did you get married in the first place?
Correct.
How did you
Correct.
what did you do or say that must clearly not be who you actually are to convince your wife to marry you in the first place? Because I'm pretty sure she wouldn't have if she had known this.
Yeah. Just and as men, we have got a role to play because we're on this menopausal journey with our wives and our loved ones and our partners. And I'll give you a little bit of a story of what happened with my wife and I, and maybe that can just put a little bit of perspective into it. But my wife was dead set against HRT. She wasn't going to take it.
Mm,
And that was because her dad, we had lost her father due to cancer.
right.
So when I started talking to my wife and trying to understand a little bit more, we would have conversations like, how are you feeling? What are you going through? What do you think you should do to help yourself? Who can you ask for advice? And we came onto the HRT topic, and she was like, no, not going to do it. And I said, why? And she said, HRT causes cancer. And I said to her, where did you get that information from? And she said, well, from her friend group, but also from things she's read, snippets here and there. And I was like, so tell me, which of your friends are medically qualified? Which of your friends are leading gynecologists? And she was like, none. And I started to smile, and she started to smile because she knew where I was going with this. And I said to her, well, instead of listening to gossip and instead of listening to what you might have or might not have read in a newspaper or even an internet comment, surely what you've got to do is go down to your gynecologist and go and say to your gynecologist, my dad died of cancer. I am scared of taking HRT because I don't understand it and I do not understand how it's going to benefit me or what the risks are associated with taking it.
Mm,
And fortunately, she listened to me and she went and she spoke to her doctor. The gynecologist turned around to her and they had a good conversation. My wife came home having got the medicine from the pharmacist and said, I'm going to start taking HRT. And it was the realization that she had to go to the right person to ask for the right information to get the quantified medical advice that she needed. Her body was shouting out and screaming for estrogen. It needed estrogen. And it has been so good for her. She really has changed her whole being has changed. She's not fixed. She's not fixed in any way, shape, or form, but she's giving her body what her body has naturally lost. And there's just an example of how a conversation between a man and a woman. I wasn't trying to fix her. I wasn't trying to be the gynecologist. I'm not qualified to be a gynecologist, but I managed to almost point her in the right direction and go, just go and have a conversation.
I think that's awesome. I think it's a great way to put it. You're not trying to. We aren't trying to fix anything, though. That's often what we try to do, which is probably part of the problem when we talk to our wives. But I think educating there's a bit of education that would do all men a lot of good, and it's not very hard to find. However, to your point, it is difficult to know who to listen to, and that's true. And I can certainly sympathize with that fact. There's a lot of people talking about this, and you don't really know who to listen to. You should probably do a little bit of research about who you are listening to, if they are giving you actual medical advice. You and I are talking about how we can support our wives, bringing awareness to the fact that this is a real struggle for women and that husbands need to be a part of it. That's what we're doing. But in doing that and in educating myself about this, I have read about the Women's Health Initiative study in 2002. I have read about how a lot of that talked about HRT being an increased risk for cancer. I have read how 17 or so years later, those same doctors actually, refuted most of what was said in that study, and that it did send a lot of women who were getting help with HRT down the wrong road, and it kept a lot of women who could have been helped by HRT from getting it. And I think the only thing that I would say about HRT is exactly what you said, which is I've learned a little bit about this. Here's what I've read. And to your point, here are my sources. This is who I'm listening to. This is what I'm reading. And this is what I've learned. And take that and go talk to your gynecologist, right? And have a conversation with a medical expert and get the help that you need. But I also think, to your story, what I remember watching Oprah's special on the menopause, called the Menopausal Revolution, I believe, and it was a couple of years
Correct.
ago. And the one thing that stood out to me about what you were saying that I thought was really interesting, and I think it was Halle Berry who said it. She said, "You may have been getting all the help that you've ever needed in your whole life from a doctor who you've been seeing for 30 years. That doctor may have delivered your children. That doctor is giving you your exams. That's your person. But if that doctor is not talking to you about menopause, if that doctor is not talking to you about hormones, if that doctor is trying to, tell you that maybe the way that you're feeling is just you getting old, if you're not getting the support you need from your doctor, no matter how long you've been seeing them, you need to get another doctor." And I thought that that was an interesting, powerful, statement from a woman to other women, because I can imagine the comfort level you would have as a woman, seeing that same person for all of those years, having that connection with, children, for example. And then to think, despite all of that, I've got to say goodbye. And I'm not getting the support I need here. And I'm going to advocate for myself, and I'm going to go get the support that I need somewhere else. Powerful.
Correct. And that's what excites me about this podcast that we're doing, Jesse. And, I think you and I can really keep it real. Here we are as two blokes having a conversation, in a bit of a bloke's way, but I'm sure that there'll be women watching this finding what we're saying quite interesting. And I'm hoping that there's going to be men also finding this really interesting. And you and I are going to be inviting a whole lot of guests on. And some of these guests are going to be medically trained. Some of them are going to be sex experts. Some of them are going to tell the guys how to have sex with a menopausal woman. Some of them are going to talk about nutrition. Some of them are going to talk about things you don't want to hear, about the impact of wine and menopause. And we're going to talk to people about what are you really going through, and what did you know or what don't you know about menopause, and are you still discovering things? And we're going to speak to some guys about, guys, we're being a little bit ignorant here. So I think we're on a fantastic discovery with this podcast, Jesse. And we're 44 minutes, 45 minutes in. I'm going to hand over to you to wrap it up. But are you excited about this? Are you excited about Men Meet Menopause, us giving the guys some bloke to bloke conversations?
I know that there are so many men out there that are just like you and me that would care about this enough to stand up and support their wives, but they just don't know about it. And the fact that you and I have a platform and an opportunity to share that, and to have, also for us to learn from all of these guests that we're going to be bringing on, and for us to continue to even hear from husbands who are listening to us and asking questions. I can't wait, because this is something that I'm super passionate about. I know you are. I think it's so amazing and serendipitous that our shared passion for this actually brought us together in a relatively short amount of time, for me at least, from when I started talking about this. And I never imagined 3 months ago or 4 months ago when I started talking about this that I'd be sitting here having a podcast with you and thinking about all these amazing guests that we're going to have on. So I'm super excited, super grateful. Can't wait to get going.
Me too, Jesse. And I think a special message to you has to come in. And I know the women who follow you on your TikTok journey and your TikTok stories, and, got to be a big thank you to you for all the effort you put in, because, I think you're doing a great service. And I think there's a lot of people out there that really respect you for it.